Ahoy there, Mythgard fans! I'm Dead Broke Nerd, and I'm here with my first deck guide. This is kind of a more in-depth kind of breakdown of a type of deck and strategy. This is the first deck that I really kind of put a lot of games into right now. It is 28-8, and a couple of those losses are frankly not particularly indicative of its power level because I initially started and was playing it completely wrong when I first started playing the deck. Had a couple losses, then realized what I was doing wrong and fixed it, and then I very rarely lose with this list. This is probably my best climbing list. It's a pretty quick gameplay. It's a powerful deck. It's hard to answer, and of course I recently, because of the Mythgard partner program, was able to get some packs to help flesh out my collection and picked up some even better cards to incorporate into the list. So I'm going to show you here what I've been messing with. Some of the tech choices are just that, tech choices that you don't need, but I'll point out why I'm running them over other things anyways. And again, I'm not pretending to be an expert in this game. I'm just showing you guys what's working for where I am on the ladder. So okay, so this is a Reanimator list, okay? That's what they call it, that wants to utilize the Boneyard in really interesting ways, mostly with Hopeless Necromantic, okay? I first got started because I pulled this premium, and I was like, all right, sweet, now I got to build a deck with it, and saw a list from Noah on the Team Rankstar page, and I was like, okay, I see what this is doing. It took me a while to realize how to play this Disc of Circadia, because it's a little bit complicated when you first get started on it, but I'm going to explain that in a second. The point is, basically what you want to do is you want to dump a big thing into the graveyard as early as possible, play the Necromantic, hopefully it dies and doesn't get banished, and then it summons it for free. So if you're summoning things like the Chort stag, huge mythic creature, you don't need it for the list, by the way, I just pulled it and fit it in. One of the cool things is I actually think this list is relatively affordable for budget players, so you don't need big expensive mythics. Indrik Beast, now I pulled these pretty early, which is partly why I built the deck, but big warded overrun 9/7. Then we've got the Perfect Grade, another really cool one. You don't need it, but it's sweet. I'm looking forward to getting the Daigoju Supreme and fitting that one in, the other half of his card art. And then, of course, Lantern Colossuses, Terragons. I've got one pushy Oni in there just because I really like the card art. And also, I like the ability to manipulate my opponent's, lanes. But things like that, and the Volkov Heavy. Now, you can see we're running some 5-drops and even a 4. And so that's because we're actually able to eventually just kind of play those things on curve. We don't really want to dump those in the grave. The way we dump things in the grave, by the way, is this Disc of Circadia. So it starts, it has 2 modes, night and day. It starts on night. And then the first time you use your power, your hero power, if you will, it flips. So every time you use your hero power, it flips, okay? It always starts at night, and when you flip today, you have to discard a card, but then all minions, including your opponents, which, by the way, it takes some time getting used to, will have Slayer 1, so it'll do an extra damage in combat. What you want to do, ideally, is on turn 1, if you are second player, because your power costs 0 the first time you play it, or on 2, with your 2 mana, you want to use your power, flip it, and discard the highest, most expensive cost card in your hand, because eventually your Hopeless Necromantic is going to pull it back, okay? So that's pretty easy. Then, of course, later, when you flip it back to night, you get Divination 2, so you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and pick one to stay on the top, and the other one gets shuffled below it, and then you draw a card. So you basically get to draw whichever of the top 2 cards you want. And then any creature that didn't attack can heal, but that's usually not relevant. Yeah, so that's the idea. We're using Foresight as the power because we really want to get that Hopeless Necromantic as early as possible. Like I said, you can totally win without Hopeless Necromantic, but Hopeless Necromantic is incredible when you can just drop it right on 3, and they either have to run away from it, or they have to blow it up and accept that a giant Indrik Beast is going to come down in their face that they're just going to have a super hard time dealing with. While they're dealing with it, you're building up, playing your 4s and 5s and whatnot. So anyways, that's the idea there with Disc of Circadia. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time to get used to, but you always want to play it. You always want to make sure you discard your card before playing anything else. That's what I kept messing up early on. You really want to make sure you're using it to flip today to discard your big thing before anything else hits the grave, because Hopeless Necromantic only pulls the bottom minion. That's so you can't let a simuzen die, which is a 1-drop, which sometimes you want to play. You can't let a simuzen die before you dump something in the grave. It's just really important, and that's gonna just, now that you know it, you're not gonna mess that up. like I did. Awkward. Yeah, so everything else in here sort of supports the idea of big things being big. That's pretty much it. It feels like a very Timmy deck to me, which when I'm first starting in a game, I tend to like those sorts of decks because it helps you kind of learn what everything else is as you're just doing simple things of slam a big thing, go face, slam a big thing, trade. You know what I mean? So we've got a lot of the purple cards help support these big things. Simuzen gives you a healing potion. What's the problem with the big thing? Well, eventually they're going to probably try to trade into it over time with a couple smaller things. Well, you can take a trade and then heal it. Very, very simple. The healing potion is free, so once you play Simuzen, you've got that healing potion until you either want to discard it with Disc of Circadia and get Slayer, or if you want to play it to heal one of your big creatures up. I've got one Ghost in the system, more to fill out the curve than anything else, but what it allows you to do is mess with your opponent's draws and kind of give you a little bit of information. Sword Saint is incredible in this list. I will tell you, it's hard to play on turn 1. In fact, you never want to play it on turn 1, right? Because if you play the, or not on turn 1, excuse me, on turn 2. If you're playing this on turn 2, it means you have 2 purple cards burned, right? But Hopeless Necromantic on 3 requires 2 green cards burned. Okay, you can see where I'm going with this. Sword Saint is very vital to the list because if you're getting smorked down by aggro who's avoiding taking trades into your big guys, you're going to need the Biting Blade, which gives a friendly minion +1 and life tap, so it heals whenever it attacks, okay? Imagine your Indrik Beast with life tap. You're healing for 10, right? So it's very important, but it's not something you want to play on turn 2 if you don't have to, okay? Sorry about that. Hotel Barkeep is a neat little card. I might back it down to 2 eventually, but what it does is it adds a powerful ramen to your hand. It's also a decent 3 to drop if you miss your Hopeless Necromantic, but it will give you an additional hero power activation, so you can flip today and then make some trades and flip back tonight and draw a card, or vice versa. Draw some cards, you know, play your ramen, flip today, discard something for a Necromantic, or discard something you're not using, make some trades with Slayer. So it's actually quite nice to do the opposite. So you get the trades with Slayer that you want with some of your little things, and then switch it back so the opponent won't have Slayer when they're making trades into your big things. You see the idea. Pushy, terragon, lantern, colossus. I don't want to get too into these guys. They're basically your big, beefy threats. I will tell you that you often don't get a chance to play Lantern Colossus and the Immolation Cloak until late in the game, but it's okay to just stack Immolation Cloaks to put on whatever, right? It's a very nice way to deal with aggro. It's a great card, of course, to help clean up certain trades that you don't want to make, you know, creatures with deadly, etc. Just a very viable, versatile card, and you can put it on some of your tankier minions. The last thing I want to point out, some of the tech choices. We've got 2 Led Astray, which is a little bit of removal. It's nice because it removes things that would otherwise, let's say, things with a demise effect, right? So this is a great thing to play on the enemy Hopeless Necromantic, and you really hope not to see this on yours, right? Detained, very similar, removes things that are problematic from the board. Can also just use the first one for detained to give -2, so you can make value trades, and then deported goes into your hand and bounces something. Finally, I'm running 2 rewind hex only because of how popular enchantments are these days. This is really helpful to play against things like tail root worms and all the earth slide decks that are out there. So it's a little bit of a tech choice. Sometimes you might be against a deck that you know isn't running enchantments, so you're just going to go ahead and burn this green card. But having more green cards to burn is fine, because look at all of the green gem requirements we've got here. So just having more greens is perfectly fine. Our purples, we really don't have a lot except for the perfect grade, and really we don't want this until either super late in the game or for the first discard, so you're burning this most of the time. Anyways, guys, I really do hope this gave you good information on how to play this sort of archetype. Again, I am not pretending to be an expert on this game, but I do think this archetype in general, this purple green Reanimator style, is really, really cool. You can also play a green blue Reanimator style, which I've seen a lot of people messing with, and I probably will mess with eventually, but I really just love the support that Sword Saint and Simuzen give, as well as the ability to play the Lantern Colossus and Terragon as some big beefy threats as well. Hope you guys enjoy the game. I'm going to attach after this just to sort of showcase how it works, and if you like the video, please like the video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. That's one of the best ways to help me out as a content creator. And finally, if you have any thoughts or ideas about the list, or you have a deck that you want me to try, go ahead and put it in the comments below, and I'm happy to take a look at it. Anyways, guys, I do hope you enjoy Till Death Do Us Part. Okay, looks like we've got ourselves a game here. Let's see how we can do with this Reanimator list. Okay. So first thing to note here is that we are going to be first player. I think this deck generally likes to be second player a little bit more, just so we can use that foresight for free really early on. And dig for the Reanimator, as well as throw something in the grave. But since that is not the case here, we're gonna go ahead and burn a Sword Saint. Now remember, we're gonna need to make sure we're burning 2 green cards over the next 2 turns, so we can hopefully find our hopeless Necromantic. But Wake the Bones is not a card we usually like seeing in the early game anyways. It doesn't do much for us, so we don't mind planning to burn those 2 cards over the next 2 turns. So we're going to take a little bit of a concerted risk here, which is hope that our opponent doesn't have a removal for this, like a, I don't know, an ignition or something like that. This is probably an unnecessary risk, to be completely honest. But I'm going to make it here, hoping my opponent develops, which I think I see a lot more often than just an ignition on a simuzen. Most of the time people develop a character. Okay, so it's going to burn a Temptation. It's important to keep an eye out for. Alright, here we go. So our gamble paid off. We're going to do that. We're going to burn ourselves Wake the Bones. And we're going to do this. Let's take a look. Okay, there is that Hopeless Necromantic. So we're going to put that back on top, so we draw that next turn. Our disc is going to go off, and we're going to discard the Lantern Colossus. Okay, so that is the card that we will get with our Hopeless Necromantic. When it dies, of course, unless my opponent uses Seal of Exile. If they do, you know, it kind of sucks, but it's not the end of the world. Mostly because, and we'll burn this, it does put them a little bit behind on mana. So we're going to go with our Hopeless Necromantic here. So I have 2 options. One, I could go ahead and make this trade, which I can do because we have Slayer from the Disc of Circadia. Or I could go ahead and put the Hopeless Necromantic down here and scooch over. Now, what that offers my opponent is the ability to move over with the Impel and then take the trade. But that's a waste of their resources as opposed to them developing something else. So I think I'm okay with it. So we're going to move over. And we're going to play Necromantic right in front of the Xerxian Recruiter because we want to get our Lantern Colossus out by making this trade. We want to force our opponent to either making this trade or doing weird things to try to ignore the trade. Either way, kind of a win. We do have Terragon on 5. Next turn we can Hotel Barkeep. So we've got a couple ways to play over the next couple turns, even if the Necromantic play doesn't work out. And that's one of the things I think people often forget about these lists, is that if you kind of plan your burning ahead of time and also look at the cards in your hand, sometimes it's not the end of the world if your Necromantic gets dealt with. Now, they can also go move if they use the Impel, but instead they develop what looks to be one of the 2 Shinobis. So it's either going to be the Shinobi of Wind or the Shinobi of air, I forget what it's called, and it's not fire, but it's either the one that will breach and deal 2 or the one that doesn't take damage when attacking for a trade. Either one is kind of okay for us. The worst thing that could happen is they trade with Simuzen. Now, they could move over and put some damage on our Lantern Colossus, but not the end of the world. We're going to play Gamayun. And what that's going to do is, gamayun is this 1-buy copy in our deck, but I really like it at 1 because it is 4. We can play it before we get to all of our cool 5-drops. But it also allows us to Divination on the same turn that we play it. In this case, we don't get a choice. We're going to take the Sword Saint we have not burned, and you can see there's a difference there between the 2. So we take the one we have not burned just in case we decide we do, in fact, want to burn it. Put that back on top. It's not bad here, but Sword Saint in this point of the game isn't super useful because my opponent hasn't really been smorking us down. So we don't really need the life tap so much as we do want to... oh, Dark Passenger. So this is going to be a teleport here. I assume this is the one that's going to have Swift, so it'll move over and attack and probably won't die from the trade. It is the Shinobi of Wind. Okay, it will die. All right, that's not the end of the world. Actually, we still got creatures on board here. We're going to be able to drop the terragon. That was actually quite a bit of resource commitment from my opponent to make that happen. If it had been the one that doesn't die when you trade, we're going to put our chort stag on top of the deck. Heck yeah. If it had been the one that doesn't die when you trade, it would have been a worse situation. But luckily, that was not the case. I think we burn the sword saint because I think the hotel barkeep has more to offer with the powerful ramen over the next couple turns. We're gonna swing for 4. We're gonna swing for 2, and we're gonna put the terragon down. Do I want to keep building onto this side of the board? What could happen from my opponent that would hurt my multiple lanes at once? I can't think of anything right now. I think we do want to go ahead and play the terragon over here. Just put it all on one side of the board. Commit to being the aggressor here and putting the damage on my opponent's face. Yeah. So at this point, guys, we are still on day, which still has Slayer. Now, on the next turn or two, we're going to want to think about using our foresight to go ahead and flip it. We get a card. We turn Slayer off, which now that we have a board developed, we don't want our opponent being able to trade easier into our things. So I think we're going to be looking to do that. We're going to get chort stag next turn. We're going to need to find a green card to burn so that we can play that on 7, which is in 2 turns. There's a Marticore. Okay, and it's going to deal 2 damage to our simuzen. Got it. Okay. You know, that's actually not the end of the world here. And the reason why is we're going to be able to go Adamant Pearl, trade, and then heal our gamayun, which is going to be really, really nice board presence here because it's going to pretty heavily punish this. Now, if you look at this, oh no, it's going to die, which is why, first off, that's why you always check, okay? But second off, that's why we're going to go ahead and use our hero power and choose a card to put back on top. We're going to put Led Astray back on top. Why? Because we need a green card to burn. And so look, Wake the Bones won't be burnable, so we need to keep Led Astray. So that will come into our hand. We will go ahead and burn it this turn. Yes. No. Well, either way, we'll take this trade. It doesn't die now. We're going to go ahead and do this. We want to see what card we get next because we're going to want to burn one of those cards. Hopeless Necromantic or Detained. We like Detained a lot because it's a great removal spell that can give us lethal. So we're going to go ahead and keep Detained on top of the deck, but it is a green card that is burnable. We will burn, Led Astray, go face for 5, put the healing potion down, and we'll develop the Hotel Barkeep as well. There we go. Okay, so that gives us a couple options next turn, which is 1, we can either burn the Detained to put the short stag down, or we can use the Detained next turn, as well as the Deported, to remove a problematic defender that would deny us lethal, because we do have lethal on board with 12 to my opponent's obvious 12 health. So we're going to be wanting to think about that as an option. I suspect my opponent's going to be able to play at least 2 creatures, if not kill some of the creatures we currently have. So we're most likely looking at putting the short stag down. No, in fact, that is the Celestial Dragon, which is going to give us lethal off of Detained, Deported. I'm not missing anything here, right? Cannot be damaged, immune to destroy effects. Ephemeral. Okay, so we do this. Deported. And swing in for exact lethal. There we go. Not too bad. Not too bad from the Hopeless Necromantic list. Didn't have to play Chort Stag there, but wouldn't have minded doing it. Wouldn't have minded doing it at all.